The scream cut through the night, just as the little girl stepped into the backyard, clutching the stray dog she had rescued only hours earlier. The wind was still, the moon pale, but the dog in her arms suddenly stiffened, ears shooting forward, muscles locking beneath his muddy fur.
Woof.
A low, trembling growl rumbled through his chest as he leapt from her embrace, landing between her and the darkness beyond the fence. His eyes burned with a fear she didn't understand. Then he lunged, barking with a desperation that shattered the quiet night, claws tearing at the earth as if something terrible was hiding beneath it. The ground shook. A shadow moved, and in that moment, the girl realized this dog had not wandered into her life by accident. He had come to warn her. Before we uncover the heartbreaking truth this little girl discovers about her mysterious dog, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. And tell me, have you ever met an animal that seemed to know more than it should? Your stories help these moments come alive. The town of Willowshade always looked softer in autumn. Leaves drifted down like quiet confessions, painting the sidewalks in warm tones that made even the loneliest corners feel gentle. But inside the small white house at the end of Ivy Lane, the silence felt heavier. Thick, lingering, shaped by the absence of a man whose voice once filled every room. That house belonged to Emma and her mother. Emma was 9, small for her age, quiet, and always holding her sleeves when she walked. Ever since her father passed away in an accident 2 years earlier, her world had shrunk to soft places. The window seat where she sketched, the corner of the school library where no one bothered her, and the backyard swing her dad had built before life stole him away. Her mother worked long hours at the clinic, trying to hold the pieces of their life together. Emma never complained, but each evening she sat alone on the swing, listening to the creak of the chains, wishing life would return the warmth it had taken. She longed for something, anything, that made her feel less invisible. Then the storm came. The rain struck the earth in sheets that night, rattling windows and shaking branches loose. Wind clawed through the yard, bending the swing until it groaned like something alive. Emma couldn't sleep. She curled under her blanket, watching lightning flash across the ceiling. Around midnight, she heard it. A cry, sharp, frightened, muffled beneath the roar of the rain. She sat up instantly. It came again. Not human, not a wild animal, a whimper. Emma ran downstairs, pressed her face against the glass of the back door, and saw him. A dog, thin, soaked, trembling violently, stood beneath the swing set. His fur clung to his body, his ribs visible through the mud, but his eyes, deep, amber, shining with intelligence, locked onto hers with a plea she felt in her bones. Without thinking, she opened the door. The dog stumbled inside, collapsing at her feet. She wrapped him in towels, whispering gentle things the way her father used to whisper to her when thunderstorms made her cry. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl. He just pressed his nose to her wrist, as if memorizing her scent, as if he had been searching for her through the storm. By morning, he was still there, curled at the foot of her bed, breathing softly. When Emma touched him, he lifted his head and placed a paw in her lap. Her mother wasn't thrilled, but saw the way Emma's face lit up brighter than it had in months. "Just for a few days," she said, "until we find his owner." Emma nodded, but something inside her whispered that this was no lost dog. In the days that followed, she named him Shadow, because he moved silently behind her everywhere she went. To the kitchen, to the bus stop, to the backyard swing where she always sat alone. Shadow never barked, never caused trouble. but he watched everything with a stillness that felt older than him. Sometimes she caught him staring at the forest behind their house, ears twitching as though listening to something she could not hear. Odd things began happening too. Shadow refused to enter the hallway where her father's old coat still hung. He avoided the garage entirely. And once, when Emma accidentally dropped her sketchbook, Shadow pawed at a page she rarely looked at, a drawing she had made of her father's pocket knife, the one that went missing the night he died. Shadow stared at that picture for a long time. Emma didn't know what it meant, but she felt it, deep in her chest, that Shadow had not wandered into her life by coincidence, that he carried something with him, a secret, a story that had not found its ending. The night everything changed was calm, unusually calm. Emma had fallen asleep with her hand resting on Shadow's back, but just past midnight, his entire body stiffened, his ears shot forward, his breath stopped. Then he rose, slowly, silently, and stared toward the back door. Emma woke instantly. "Shadow? What's wrong?" But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking into the darkness outside. And for the first time, Emma felt something watching back. Shadow stood at the back door without making a sound. His body stretched forward, muscles locked beneath his thickening fur. His tail, usually soft and relaxed, rose stiffly behind him, straight as a rod, trembling at the tip. Emma pushed herself upright, rubbing her eyes. But the moment she whispered his name again, Shadow's head snapped toward her, not in fear, in warning. His ears angled sharply forward, catching movements she couldn't hear. Tiny vibrations in the floorboards, faint whispers of air shifting outside. He inhaled once, deeply, the kind of inhale that pulled the world into his lungs. His chest expanded, his pupils narrowed. A low sound rolled from his throat, half growl, half whimper, heavy with something that made Emma's skin prickle. Shadow stepped backward from the door, then forward again, paws placing themselves with surgical precision. Every movement was silent, intentional, as if he were stalking something invisible. His nose pressed to the bottom of the doorframe. He sniffed slowly, sharply, then froze. Emma clutched her blanket. "Shadow, you're scaring me." He didn't look away. He pressed his shoulder against the door, testing it, his nails clicking lightly against the wood. His breathing shifted from slow and deep to small, short bursts. The fur along his spine rose in a straight, unwavering line. His tail dropped, not tucked, but lowered into a position Emma had never seen before. Ready, alert, protective, and then he backed away, only once. 2 steps, soft, controlled. He positioned himself between Emma and the door, his head lowered, gaze locked, stance rooted like a guardian preparing for impact. Emma's heart hammered. "Is someone out there?" Shadow didn't answer with a bark. He answered with silence, the kind of silence that meant yes. A sudden thump sounded from outside. Light, faint, but unmistakable. A footstep? A falling branch? Emma couldn't tell, but Shadow reacted instantly. His body jerked forward, his breath halted, his tail lashed once like a whip, and his growl deepened into a warning that filled the entire room. Then something even stranger happened. Shadow turned his head, not toward the door, but toward Emma's father's old coat hanging in the hallway. He stared at it with unwavering focus. A soft whine escaped him, then another. Not fear, not confusion. Recognition. Shadow stepped toward the coat, sniffed the air around it, then returned to the door with renewed urgency. His paws scratched lightly at the wood, not trying to open it, but signaling, almost begging Emma to stay back. His breathing came faster now, each inhale sharp enough to cut the space between them. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Shadow, what's wrong? What do you smell?" Shadow didn't move, didn't blink. He just leaned closer to the door until his nose touched the metal handle, and then he recoiled as if burned. He stumbled backward, legs shaking, eyes widening with something that twisted Emma's stomach into knots. It wasn't danger he sensed. It was something familiar, something painful, something old. Shadow took 3 trembling steps toward Emma, pressing his head into her side, nudging her backward, as if trying to move her away from something only he understood. His body shielded hers completely. His breathing turned frantic. His tail swept low, protective. His stance said one thing clearly: run. But Emma couldn't move. Her hand reached instinctively for his collar, clinging to the one steady thing in the room. "Shadow, please tell me what's going on." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic scent through the cracks in the door. Emma couldn't smell it, but Shadow did. He growled again, this time louder, sharper, filled with a heartbreak Emma didn't understand. Lightning flashed. For a moment, the backyard lit up. Trees, swing set, fence, all bathed in white. And there, at the very edge of the yard, a shadow moved. Shadow lunged, barking so violently the windows vibrated. Emma stumbled backward. Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. Shadow wasn't acting like a lost dog anymore. He was acting like a dog who had finally found what he'd been searching for. Something he feared. Something he remembered. Something that had followed him here. And whatever it was coming back. The shadow at the edge of the yard vanished the moment the lightning faded, swallowed by darkness so quickly, Emma wondered if her eyes had tricked her. But Shadow didn't waver. He stood pressed against the glass door, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. His bark echoed through the small house, raw, sharp, frantic. Not aggressive, not fearful. A warning. Emma backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Her breath came shallow, uneven. "Shadow, who's out there?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Shadow turned his head toward her. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, reflecting the soft light of the kitchen like twin amber lanterns. He took a step toward her, nudged her leg, then looked back at the door. Again and again. A gesture so deliberate, so urgent, that Emma finally understood. He wanted her to hide. Before she could move, another sound drifted from outside. Soft, deliberate, impossibly quiet. A footstep. Shadow's growl deepened into something primal, ancient. His body lowered into a defensive stance. His tail raised slightly, quivering with tension. His nails gripped the tile floor as he pushed himself forward, planting his weight between Emma and the door. Emma's heart hammered so loudly she could feel it in her fingertips. She grabbed the nearest thing, a flashlight from the counter, and held it with trembling hands. "Mom's not home. Mom's not home," she whispered to herself, as if saying it aloud would summon some kind of protection. Shadow suddenly whipped his head toward the window beside the hallway. He sprinted there, paws skidding across the floor, barking directly at the glass. Emma aimed her flashlight just as another flash of lightning lit up the yard. A shape stood at the fence. Tall, still, watching. Emma's throat closed. She stumbled backward, almost slipping on the hardwood floor. "No! No!" Shadow barked again, claws scratching at the wall as if trying to climb through it. His body thrust forward with every breath, every warning. But then, in a shocking shift, he fell silent. completely silent. He lowered his head slowly, ears tilting backward, muscles tightening. It wasn't a predator's stance, it was recognition. Emma blinked. "Do you know him?" She meant it as a whisper, but the words tore out of her as a frightened gasp. Shadow didn't react. He just pressed his nose to the window frame and let out a soft, aching whine. Thunder rolled across the sky. Emma took a cautious step closer. "Shadow. What is it?" He nudged her again, harder this time. Then he walked toward the hallway leading to her father's old coat, and stopped. He stared at it with an intensity that sent cold chills along Emma's spine. Shadow approached the coat slowly. He sniffed it, pressed his forehead against it, then backed away, trembling violently. Emma stared, breath frozen. He wasn't afraid of the coat. He was grieving. "Shadow, did you know my dad?" she whispered. The dog lifted his head. His eyes glistened under the soft light. He walked toward her slowly, placed his paw on her knee, and looked up with the deepest sorrow she had ever seen in an animal's face. Before Emma could speak again, the porch creaked. Shadow snapped toward the door. His body shot forward, tail raised high, bark exploding from him with a ferocity Emma hadn't heard before. The door rattled under the pressure of the wind, or something else. Something pushing softly, testing the lock. Emma's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the floor. Tears blurred her vision. "Shadow, please don't leave me." He didn't. He returned to her side, pressing his body against hers protectively. His breath came fast and heavy, hot against her arm. He licked her hand once, as if promising he wouldn't let anything touch her. A car passed on the street. Headlights sliced across the yard. And in that split second of illumination, Emma saw the figure again. Standing closer this time, inside the fence, facing the house. Shadow erupted in another bark so violent that the picture frames on the wall rattled. The figure stepped back, but he didn't run. He simply lifted something in his hand, something metallic that caught the dim light, and placed it gently on the ground before retreating into the shadows. Emma's pulse staggered. "What? What did he leave?" Shadow barked until the figure disappeared completely. Then he fell silent again, his body collapsing into a tense stillness. He looked at Emma, then at the object outside, then back at her, as if begging her not to go. But Emma moved anyway. She crawled to the window and flicked her flashlight on. Her hand shook so badly the beam wavered across the yard. Then it landed on the object. Small, silver, familiar. Emma leaned closer, breath catching in her throat. It was a keychain, a tiny metal compass attached to it, worn, scratched, faded. She lifted a trembling hand to her mouth. Her father used to carry one just like it, the one that went missing the night he died. Shadow whimpered behind her, soft, mournful, pleading. Emma stared at the compass lying in the wet grass, the world tilting sideways. Shadow hadn't stumbled into her life by accident. He hadn't been lost. He had been searching for her, for this house, for the truth buried the night her father died. And now, whatever took her father, had returned something, as if delivering a message. A final crack of thunder split the sky. The porch creaked again. Then, a hand pressed against the glass. Shadow hurled himself forward with a snarl so fierce it shook the door in its frame. Emma screamed. The hand vanished. Shadow barked so hard his voice cracked, every fiber of his being thrown into protecting her from the darkness trying to force its way back into her life. Emma backed away, shaking uncontrollably, clutching the flashlight like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Something was coming. Something connected to Shadow. Something connected to her father. And Shadow wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her only warning. The police arrived within minutes of Emma's terrified call. Blue and red lights washed over the quiet street, flashing against rain-soaked pavement and trembling branches. Officers swept the yard, searched the fence line, checked every shadow, but found nothing. No footprints, no intruder, no sign of a break-in. The only thing left behind was the small metal compass glinting weakly in the grass. Emma sat on the sofa wrapped in a blanket, while Shadow paced the living room relentlessly, unable to rest. His ears twitched at every sound. His eyes never left the windows. He pressed himself against her legs each time she trembled, and every time an officer asked a question, he growled low under his breath, as if protecting her even from them. "Are you sure you saw someone?" one officer asked gently. Emma nodded, voice trembling. He left that." She pointed to the compass, now sealed in an evidence bag. The officer exhaled. "Do you recognize it?" Emma hesitated. Shadow stopped pacing and stared directly at the compass. Head lowered, tail still, breath shallow. The officer noticed the dog's reaction and knelt down. "He's been doing that the whole time," Emma whispered. "He knows something." Another officer entered, whispering something quietly to his partner. The first officer straightened. "Emma, can we speak with your mother when she gets home? There are some details about your father's case we may need to revisit." Emma's breath caught. "My father's case? But they said his death was an accident." The officer exchanged a look with his colleague, not a reassuring one. "Accidents don't usually come with missing personal items that show up years later," Shadow barked, short, sharp, as if agreeing. After the officers left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Emma sat on the floor beside Shadow, burying her fingers in his fur. "Shadow, why did you react like that?" she whispered. "What do you know?" He didn't answer, of course, but something shifted in his posture. He rested his head in her lap, not timidly, but with a slow, deliberate weight, as if finally allowing himself to lean on her instead of the other way around. His breath came soft and shaky, his eyes half closed in a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Emma touched his face gently. "Were you there the night Dad died?" Shadow lifted his head. He looked directly into her eyes with an expression she had seen only once before, in the old framed photograph of her father holding a search and rescue dog, smiling under autumn trees. Emma blinked. The dog in that photo had the same eyes, the same amber glow, the same scar along the left ear. Her throat tightened. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed the photo from the hallway wall, and held it beside Shadow. Shadow stared at the picture. Then he placed his paw on it. Emma's breath shattered. No, that can't be true. That was years ago. That dog disappeared the same night Dad—" Shadow whimpered, pressing closer. Tears blurred Emma's vision. "Shadow, were you Dad's dog?" He stepped forward and pressed his forehead to her chest, gently, mournfully. Emotion tore through her like a storm. Shadow hadn't come to her by accident. He had come home. Just then, a soft thud echoed from the porch. Shadow froze. His body stiffened, ears pricking sharply. He ran to the window, growling, not with confusion this time, but certainty. Emma followed slowly, heart pounding, breath thin. Outside, something small lay on the porch, another object, carefully placed. Shadow barked, deep and furious. Emma flicked on the outside light. The porch glowed, and there it was, her father's badge. Dirty, scratched, rusted at the edges. Shadow whimpered, backing up until he pressed against Emma's legs. His body trembled, not from fear, but from memory. Someone wasn't just returning her father's belongings. They were sending them back piece by piece, like a trail, like a confession. Emma fell to her knees. Shadow, who's doing this? Who were you trying to warn me about all this time? Shadow looked toward the forest, into the same darkness he had stared at since the night he arrived. Then he barked. A single, loud, commanding bark. Someone was out there. Someone who knew her father. Someone who knew Shadow. Someone who had kept a secret buried for years. A secret that was now rising back to the surface. And Shadow was no lost stray. He was the last witness, the only one who had survived that night. And he had returned for one reason: to lead her to the truth. The wind howled through the trees as Emma stepped onto the porch, clutching Shadow's collar with trembling fingers. The porch light flickered in the breeze, casting long shadows across the yard. Her father's rusted badge lay at her feet, cold, heavy, impossible to ignore. Shadow pushed past her, planting himself between Emma and the forest. His stance was rigid, his breath sharp, his growl low and unbroken. He was no longer uncertain, no longer confused. He knew exactly who was out there, and he was ready. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her ears. Shadow, if you know who took Dad, show me, please. Shadow turned his head slightly, eyes locked on hers with a depth that stole her breath away. Then he stepped off the porch. Just one step, then another. He looked back only once, to make sure she was following. Emma hesitated, fear crawling up her spine. The forest behind their home wasn't large, but at night it felt endless, ancient, alive. Her mother would never forgive her for going in alone, but Shadow hadn't led her wrong yet. He had protected her every moment since the stormy night he arrived bloody and broken at her doorstep. She pulled on her boots, grabbed her flashlight, and followed him into the dark. The moment they crossed the tree line, the air shifted. The world felt smaller, tighter, as though the trees leaned in to listen. Shadow moved with precision, nose low, tail straight behind him, tracking something she could not see. Shadow, she whispered, slow down, please. But he couldn't. His legs carried him with purpose, weaving through brambles and fallen leaves until they reached a narrow clearing Emma had never seen before. The clearing her father disappeared in. Shadow stopped so suddenly that Emma stumbled into him. His ears shot forward. His entire body leaned into the wind as he sniffed the air in deep, broken pulls. A twig snapped. Emma froze. Shadow's growl deepened into a vicious rumble that vibrated through the ground. Then a voice cut through the darkness. A voice Emma hadn't heard in 2 years. Emma? Her flashlight slipped from her hands, falling into the leaves. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. But Shadow didn't bark. He didn't lunge. Instead, he whimpered, a sound filled with grief and longing, and stepped forward. Emma retrieved her flashlight with shaking fingers. She lifted it slowly, terrified of what she might see. And there, emerging from the shadows, was a man. Thin, pale, exhausted. Her father. Emma's breath fractured. She staggered back, knees buckling. Dad! Her voice broke into a sob. Shadow sprinted ahead, colliding into the man with such force he nearly fell. The dog pressed his entire body against him, whining uncontrollably, tail whipping in frantic, joyful arcs. Emma's flashlight quivered in her hands. She stumbled forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad! Dad, you're alive!" Her father, gaunt, trembling, opened his arms just in time to catch her. She collapsed into him, sobbing into his chest. His hands shook violently as he held her, whispering her name again and again like a prayer he'd thought he would never say again. "I didn't want you to find me," he whispered, voice cracking. "Not like this." Emma shook her head desperately. "Why? What happened? Why didn't you come home?" Her father looked away, eyes dark with fear. "Because the man who tried to kill me, he's still out here." Shadow stiffened instantly. His growl rose like thunder. Emma clutched her father tighter. "Who? Dad, who did this?" Before he could answer, a cold voice drifted from the tree line. "You always were too stubborn to die." Emma froze. A tall figure stepped into the clearing, boots sinking into the wet leaves. His face was partially shadowed, but his eyes glinted with a cruel, calculated calm. Her father's breath hitched. "Run, Emma! Take Shadow and run!" The man lifted a pistol. Shadow lunged before the shot rang out. The sound exploded through the trees, scattering birds into the night. Emma screamed as Shadow collided with the man, knocking him backward. The gun flew into the darkness, landing somewhere beyond the tree line. The attacker grabbed Shadow by the scruff, but the dog twisted, teeth flashing. He bit down on the man's arm with a ferocity Emma had never seen, shaking violently. Her father pulled Emma behind a tree. "Stay down! Don't move!" But Emma couldn't look away. Shadow fought like a creature who had carried 2 years of grief in his chest. Every snarl, every snap of his jaws, every desperate movement was fueled by the night he lost his partner, by the night he watched his world fall apart. The man shoved him off, scrambling for the fallen weapon. Shadow barked wildly, trying to draw the man's attention away from Emma and her father. The attacker lunged forward, snatching the gun from the ground. He pointed it directly at Shadow. "No!" Emma screamed, running into the clearing, but Shadow was faster. He darted sideways, forcing the man to turn. The gunshot cracked again, lighting the darkness for a fraction of a second. The bullet missed. Shadow leapt, jaws clamping onto the man's wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon. The man howled in pain, slamming his shoulder into a tree, trying to dislodge the dog. But Shadow held on, refusing to let him reach for Emma. Her father staggered forward, grabbing the man from behind, wrestling him to the ground. Leaves exploded into the air. A final struggle, a choked cry, and then silence. Shadow stepped back, panting heavily, his fur slick with rain and sweat. Emma ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck as he pressed his forehead to her chest. Her father stood over the unconscious attacker, shaking uncontrollably. "It's over. It's finally over." Emma looked up at him, tears streaming. "You're alive. Dad, you're—" He dropped to his knees and pulled her close. "I came back as soon as I could, but I didn't make it far. And Shadow never stopped searching for me." Emma held Shadow tighter, feeling his heartbeat thundering against her own. Shadow hadn't come to protect her. He had come to bring her father home, and in the darkness of the forest he once feared, he had finally done it. Dawn crept slowly across Willowshade as Emma, her father, and Shadow emerged from the forest. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the trees like soft hands, lifting shadows from the ground and revealing the quiet town waking from sleep. Police sirens grew louder in the distance, echoes of safety rather than danger, and the air felt lighter, warmer, as if the night itself had exhaled. Emma held her father's hand tightly, afraid that if she blinked too long, he might disappear again. His steps were unsteady, weakened by years of hiding, but each one carried a determination she had never seen in him before. Shadow walked beside them, head high, tail sweeping slowly in calm arcs. Every few steps he nudged Emma's leg, as if checking she was still there, still safe. At the forest edge, officers rushed toward them, voices filled with disbelief and relief. Emma's father collapsed into their arms, not from injury, but from the overwhelming weight of being found. Finally found. Emma stayed by his side, one hand gripping his sleeve, the other resting on Shadow's back. The officers praised the dog first. They always did. But this time, Emma didn't mind, because she knew the truth behind the badge her father once wore. She knew Shadow had carried that truth alone for years, through storms, through grief, through the dark places where hope rarely survived. Shadow wasn't just a dog who saved them. He was the piece of her father that had never stopped fighting. Hours later, after statements were given and the attacker taken into custody, Emma sat with Shadow on the front porch. Her father slept inside, finally home, finally safe. Birds chirped softly in the yard, leaves rustled with the morning breeze, and the world felt gentler than it had in a long time. Emma stroked Shadow's fur. "You didn't just come for me? You came back for him." Shadow lifted his head, eyes warm, soft, filled with the kind of wisdom no book could teach. He rested his paw on her knee, an old gesture, one he had once used with her father. Emma smiled through tears. "You never gave up, did you?" He leaned into her side, breathing slow and steady, letting the peace of the morning settle around them. Later, when her father woke and joined them on the porch, Shadow rose and placed himself between them, tail wagging lightly. Emma's father laughed, the sound rough but real, and ruffled the dog's fur. "I thought I lost everything that night," he whispered, but he never stopped looking. Emma leaned her head on her father's shoulder. "Neither did I." They sat together, the three of them, wrapped in the quiet beauty of a new beginning. The world had stolen years from them, but now it was giving something back, a chance to heal, to rebuild, to breathe again. And Shadow finally rested. His search was over. Before the video ends, tell me, do you believe dogs carry memories of the people they've loved, even when the world thinks they've forgotten?